Hollyhocks is one of those flowers that should not go missing in your cottage garden. They add color and structure, height, and drama, and some romanticism. It it's a good idea to pre-sprout them to make sure that they're alive. I am using older seed because I had too many seed packets stashed away from good intentions of planting. You know how those go. I never get to them. So I just threw them all in the plate, and some germinated, some did not. So clearly, some are dead, some were still alive. I hope to get them in the ground as soon as I can and flowering so that I can enjoy and beautify my home. I believe that the cottage garden is one of the most intuitive gardening styles you can choose simply because it grew out of a need for nourishment and beauty and cemented itself onto our collective imagery in childhood fairy tales. There is something so majestic and abundant in a cottage garden, and at the same time so unpretentious that it is sure to mesmerize any passerby. The key for its success is to choose a varied planting scheme, trying to stagger flushes of flowers throughout the season. A couple of weeks after sowing the germinated seed, the hollyhock plantlets showed promising signs of growth. But the key to cottage garden success is in perennials. Bearded irises are a must-have staple in any cottage garden. When they bloom, they dazzle, unapologetically. They also happen to be a workhorse, carrying their own weight. While they only flower for about 2 weeks, they make those 2 weeks memorable. Perennials such as flag irises will burst open their petals in mid-spring, while most other annual flowers are still small seedlings. When well situated in a sunny spot with rich, well-draining soil, these irises will not only grow, but multiply. In fact, you may have to divide them every few years to reinvigorate the plants. Oriental poppies are another incredible plant for a cottage garden. Mid-spring here is quite the spectacle because of these flowers. Now, I didn't actually plan for these. I just started planting, and soon enough I discovered through the years which plants actually work the best. I had these Oriental poppies actually come from the other side of the street because they had naturalized there, probably from an old garden, since this is an old street with old houses. Now, the flag irises also have shown to be very reliable, and that way, through the passing of years, a rhythm to the garden starts to appear. That is a very important concept to grasp. A splendid cottage garden cannot be put up in a season. It must be cultivated. Even if you went out and spent hundreds of dollars buying mature plants to install overnight as a cottage garden, extreme makeover style, it would fall flat. That may be one of the reasons why you almost never see garden makeover TV series, unlike the infestation of overnight interior design shows. A garden cannot be conjured and given. It must be labored over through time. A true cottage garden is as much about growing plants as it is about cultivating a gardener. It needs to be a bit rough around the edges. It must show a bit of struggle, of plants vying for the limelight, much like trees in a forest or a wild meadow. If there is one rule for cottage gardens, it is that they should not show 1 square inch of exposed ground. You must pack plants side by side, but most importantly, you must stagger compatible plants that are able to succeed each other. Editing is important, knowing to recognize which plants tend to overpower others. Weeding is the constant chore, clearing up space for the showy, finicky protagonists to command the limelight. For instance, I must keep the ground ivy in check. While this weed is arguably a beautiful plant, knitting a carpet of lavender blooms, they tend to overpower everything, slowly strangling the garden. It was introduced to North America in the 1800s as a medicinal and ornamental plant. It is considered invasive. You can't really eradicate it, and there is no good non-toxic way of controlling it other than hand pulling, so that is what I do. Having annual seedlings on the ready is a great strategy for a cottage garden because the hollyhock variety I had germinated was said to produce flowers in the first year. I was treating it as an annual, although it could potentially behave like a short-lived perennial. I went about finding bare spots in the garden, plugging in these seedlings.
Hopefully they would develop a flower in a few months. You can take the same approach with zinnias, marigolds, snapdragons, and other annuals, having them ready by sowing in trays to be transplanted whenever a bare spot opens in the garden. I try to plant them in small clumps spread out around the garden to give a harmonic continuation for the space. Cottage gardens grew out of necessity in medieval England, as most land was hoarded by lords and peasants could only cultivate the extra things they needed for daily life immediately around their homes. The bulk of the food was produced in the fields owned by the lords, but they planted their vegetables, fruits, and herbs for personal use around their cottages. In the 18th century, these gardens became more idealized and romanticized by the upper class, as they made them less practical and more ornamental. I try to have a more ornamental bed beside the walkway leading to my front door, planting more practical vegetables further on. However, I decided to incorporate a few of my hollyhock plants amongst my tomatoes and runner beans on the side garden. It is a sunny spot, and since hollyhocks require sun to flower, I felt that it could be a suitable place for them to grow. They will prosper with a rich, well-draining soil with good sun exposure. But this spot certainly had all of those characteristics. By incorporating a few flower spikes in the middle of tomatoes and bean vines, I was hoping to elevate the space, bringing color and scent. That is, if the veggies would not smother the hollyhocks. I usually raise too many seedlings of everything, so I don't mind if some get lost in the process of natural competition. I think we should all be growing more flowers, making our homes and gardens more pleasant spaces to live in. They make our lives richer by infusing our world with color and rhythm. In the next block, I'll share a few extra tips to maximize flower production in your garden, right after this commercial. I believe if we all started growing more flowering plants, we could help elevate the mood of our communities by providing a more cheerful environment around us. There is one maintenance tip that is important to prolonging blooms in your garden.
The flag irises are nearing the end of their display. There's a lot of wilted flowers, but there's still a few flushes left, and I want to take advantage of that. Because it has rained a bit here, it kind of makes them lose their viability faster. But one thing you need to do is to actually deadhead them, and that will encourage the new blooms to bloom. It will prevent the plants from setting seed, which actually drains their energy, and actually it looks neater, so that's the reason why you should do it. You can prolong your display.
Besides deadheading, there is another maintenance task to keep your bearded flag irises looking their best. You must divide them from time to time. Unlike the smaller bulb irises, the bearded iris grows from rhizomes similar to ginger root. They have been a reliable plant for me with almost no pest and disease pressure. They eventually grow too thickly in a spot, which can diminish their blooms and even cause some rhizomes to die. To help keep them fresh with some room to grow, it is advisable to divide these plants every 3 to 4 years, giving them the extra leg space. They also come in several colors, so you are sure to find ones that you love. While the irises are always reliable to me, this year I ended up disappointed with the hollyhocks. They grew beautiful leaves at first, but then my garden nemesis came to attack. Yes, the groundhog ate it all.
Pretty lackluster performance from the hollyhocks. It's not even their fault, because they were growing well. They looked beautiful. But the groundhog just came and ate everything, so it's kind of impossible for me to have hollyhocks. I was really hoping that this would complement the garden design, and they were growing nice large leaves. Then one day the groundhog comes and eats it all. It seems like it's desperate, trying to eat everything. I lost my zinnias. There isn't much I can do. I can't just have cages everywhere, and there's always going to be groundhogs around here. It's just what it is.
But even with the casualties, the garden still manages to impress as it changes through the seasons.